This happened to my Nana back in sometime in 2019, and it was New Year's Eve. Now, this was before the global pandemic, so my Nana was by herself in a condo. And usually every year, my mom and my brother and I would go up to the condo, go swimming in her pool, and even have dinner and watch the fireworks with her. However, this was the time when we just moved and we were getting settled into our house. So at that point, my Nana was alone this New Year's. Now, while she was alone, she, of course, she was in her 70s, decided to go swimming in the pool that was down on the first floor. As she went down to the first floor, she went to go change and then went to go to the pool. As she headed straight for the pool, however, she looked to see that there was a man that she's never seen before, was in the hot tub. Curiosity got the better of her and she walked over to the hot tub as she normally did, and she looked. She could see that this man looked like he was in his 50s. "Hey there," he said. Nice, Happy New Year," he said. "Oh, hey there," my Nana replied. She looked at him, but I could tell that she was uncomfortable. Based on what she told me, it was shortly after she spent Christmas with me and my family. But with that said, something strange was going on. This man looked like she's never seen before, and he was making her uncomfortable. She seriously does not know what it was, but something in her mind saying that this guy ended up looking really freaky, as he looked like he was homeless, but at the same time, he was in his 50s. Oh, thank you for the new year. My daughter just moved out of this apartment, so yeah, she apparently is living with her boyfriend right now, he said. So far this guy seemed to be alright to my Nana, so my Nana went along with it. But it wasn't until after the swim. So my Nana went back to her condo in her room, and she was just getting dinner ready when suddenly she heard bangs thing coming from her door. She looked for the peephole to see it was the exact same man, and it was Jacob. Of course, he had a knife, and he started banging, screaming, demanding my Nana to let him in. My Nana nearly was scared at this point, so she made sure the door was locked and then went to call security. As she was calling security, they phoned the police, and she stayed in her room what seemed to be like maybe minutes until the banging stopped. The police later came up and knocked on her door and asked if the man was around, but of course Nana said that she couldn't see the man or hear him anymore. So with that said, the security guards and police searched the entire condo. But unfortunately, they didn't find him, and they assumed that he got away. And that's when Nana explained that he was in the condo with her earlier in the pool. Of course, he said that his daughter had moved out recently. Wasn't sure if this guy was lying or trying to pull a prank, or at least try to come up with the story. But with that being said, at least a day later, it was New Year's Day, my Nana was watching TV, when suddenly a news report said that the guy who basically broke into an old woman's house where he assaulted her and basically murdered the husband. Of course, the elderly survived from her injuries on the way to the hospital, and survived just when they got there. But unfortunately, what made Nana's heart sink was the picture. The picture of the suspect actually looked like Jake, and it said that he had been arrested as he'd been murdering people from place to place. Mainly, he went for elderly as they have more jewelry and expensive stuff. That being said, my Nana was just glad that Jake was arrested, as what could have happened if Jacob ended up breaking for the house, or at least her condo. Now, this was actually a scary experience that my Nana witnessed, and she doesn't want to go through that again. And she's just glad that she wasn't killed that night. So this happened sometime in 2018 when I used to work at a riding stable with with the people that I used to ride at. Now, with that being said, while I was at work, something really strange but freaky happened at the same time. Now, this was on New Year's Eve, and of course, I only was working a few hours in the day, and of course, I had New Year's Day off, so the other worker would be in. So, with that being said, my schedule was pretty much all over the place as some people were off for the holidays and etc. So, with that being said, it was New Year's Eve. I ended up coming to work for the morning shift as it was only 3 hours, so it wasn't really a big deal or anything like that. So, with that being said, my boss ended up asking me to go take a horse from the pasture and bring her in the barn because they were doing turnouts as we mucked out a couple stalls. I nodded with agreement and took a lead rope and went down to the pasture that was at the house, a little bit further than normal. Of course, it was near the house, so it was a little bit further of a walk. But as I was walking, I noticed that the horse I was supposed to get, we'll call her Chompy, was just staring what seemed to be the tree line not far from the house. I was confused as why she was turning to the tree line, thinking maybe she might have saw something. She was just staring at it at the far end of the pasture. I looked over to see if I could find anything. As it was winter, I couldn't see anybody or anything, thinking maybe she might have heard a wild animal. We do get coyotes, wolves, foxes, and other animals wandering around the area, so I wouldn't be very surprised. With that being said, I ended up walking over to the mare, and as I got in the pasture, I heard some trees and branches snapping. I turned around in the forest looking to see that there was a black figure. In my point of view, it kind of looked like a bear, but it looked too tall to be a bear, but I did not exactly know what it was, so I was getting a little nervous. As I'm calming the mare down, I looked to see that it looked to be a 10-foot tall gorilla-like creature. I was shitting myself at the same time, but I did not know exactly what to do. I was very, very disturbed by it. Whatever it did, it took off in the other direction, laying out an unsettling sound. I nearly fell to the ground, but I immediately got back up, and then I took the horse, and we ended up leaving the area. But of course, with that said, I did not tell my boss about it, but I told my boss about it did near the end, as I was debating on whatever I should or not. When I told her, she said that she would have a look at the back with one of the staff later the next day. But of course, the next day arrived, and it was shortly after New Year's where I got a disturbing realization and discovery. Apparently, the other worker who was there the day after I left, she ended up going back there to see what it was that I saw. But she didn't see anybody or anything, but she saw what seemed to be big footprints on the ground. She showed me a few pictures, and I realized they were nothing human-like. I don't even know if that was Bigfoot, or maybe some bear, or maybe even somebody pulling a prank. I don't even know what it was. Ever since that place I still went to before I moved, I never saw that creature again, and I had no idea as to why it was there at the area, and I never saw that again. I'm still very glad that I don't see this thing to this day. I'm still pretty shooken from what the experience I had. This happened to my parents back when I was a kid, probably when I was around, I guess you could say 5 or 6 years old. I barely remember as I was a kid. Now, with that being said, my mom and dad has decided to celebrate their New Year's Eve, which they decided to go to what seemed to be a bar. Now, with that being said, I barely remember this as my mom vaguely remembers it. She basically tells me what she knows. So, yeah. If anyways, with that said, my mom ended up being the one that she really was a kind mom. She got us a babysitter, and she and my dad went to this bar. This bar was not far. It was maybe a 5 or 2 minute drive, as my dad wasn't planning on drinking, but decided to go with my mom in case if something were to happen. Which I'm glad my dad did, because if he didn't, neither of them would have been home at this time. Now, my mom and dad went to the bar, and a lot of people were celebrating by having drinks and stuff. So my mom and dad were spending the New Year's Eve drinking. As they were drinking, doing their usual thing, my dad ended up looking over to see that there was a man. Now, this man looked like he had a handgun and had to warn my mom to get out of there. So they decided to have their last drinks, and as they had their last drinks, there was a gunshot. There was followed by screaming, but luckily my mom and dad got into the car, And as they soon did, before my dad had a cell phone or anything like that, they drove us near to the police station that was only about a few minutes drive, and they reported the incident to the police, as the officer has said they sent some more officers to investigate the bar. Now, of course, the bar was closed down for a couple days as the recent shooting happened, but as of this, all I know is that the person who had been shot down the whole place had apparently killed himself. He basically took his own life after he shot and killed at least 2 or 3 people. Some lives were lost that day, and I feel very sad. But with that being said, I'm just glad my mom and dad got out of there, because if they haven't, they would not have come home that night, or neither one of them would have been home. I'm just glad my mom and dad are still alive to this day, because this could have been a different story if they hadn't.